I started dating the famous heiress when she was at her absolute lowest. For 3 years, she lived in my apartment on my dime. The day she was set to reclaim her old life, I used the last of my savings to buy her a gift. I was getting ready to say goodbye. But then I heard her telling someone, "He's not really my boyfriend. Just think of him as a boy toy I keep around." I hid the gift behind my back. Forget it, I thought. Ghosting her would be better. Later, she would kneel in a chapel for 3 days and 3 nights, praying for just one more chance to see me. I walked back to our rental, the goodbye speech I'd been practicing replaying in my head the whole way. But as I got to the door, I heard Vivian's voice from inside the other room. "Leo isn't my boyfriend. From now on, just think of him as a boy toy I keep around." Her tone was casual, but the words pierced me like a sword. My hand tightened around the gift bag. My heart felt like it was stuffed with cotton, and I couldn't breathe. So that's all I was in her eyes? Suddenly, the apartment door opened. A woman in a sharp business suit saw me and froze. I shifted slightly to the side. Behind her, Vivian was still wearing the cheap t-shirt I'd bought her. When she saw me standing outside the door, her expression stiffened. "Leo, you're back early." I tucked the gift further behind my back. I forced a smile. "Yeah, got off work early today." Before she could say anything else, I mumbled an excuse about getting boba tea and turned to head back downstairs. Our apartment was in a rundown part of the city, but just one alley over, you were hit with the dazzling metropolis. I stared at the familiar, brilliant neon lights. My vision blurred. The overwhelming pain I'd been suppressing finally broke free, turning into hot tears streaming down my face. I overheard 2 girls nearby, their voices buzzing with excitement. "Wow, the LA heiress. She's seriously gorgeous. It's like a billionaire family drama playing out in real life." Right now, the whole city was gossiping about the famous heiress returning to her family's good graces. And that heiress was Vivian. I pulled out my phone. The news was still wall-to-wall coverage of Vivian. I replayed a video I'd watched earlier that afternoon. Her beautiful, regal face looked straight at the camera as she declined a more in-depth interview. But she did say there was one person she was very grateful for. When reporters pressed her for a name, she clammed up. It was laughable. How could I have been so arrogant to think she was talking about me? 3 years ago, Vivian lost a brutal family power struggle and was exiled from the world of LA's elite. I was the one who found her back in my rural hometown. At the time, she couldn't see and couldn't walk. She'd been pushed out of a car, left on the side of the road like a beggar. After I brought her home, she tried to end her life several times. I stayed by her side, silently, until she gave up the idea. She never talked about her past. But I knew she was Vivian Smith, the once famous LA heiress, because of one small act of kindness when she was in high school, an act that changed the lives of all the poor kids in my village, including me. The Smith family had set up a charity fund in her name for all the kids in our village, boys and girls alike. The foundation covered all our expenses from high school through college. But the foundation only existed for a few years. I happened to be in the last group of students who benefited from it before graduating from college. I met Vivian once when I started high school. Back then, she was pale and had a fragile, sickly air about her. She represented the foundation and handed me the financial aid package herself. When our eyes met, it was like looking at the sun. She was that dazzling. But she was fighting to hide her impatience, just barely managing to pose for a group photo with us. The next time I saw her, I had graduated from college and was working as a sales associate at a luxury department store. She walked in wearing a tailored women's suit, her beautiful, aristocratic face tinged with a world-weary look. The store manager and department head personally rushed to greet her. Outside, security guards were setting up barricades to clear the store for her. I heard a coworker next to me whisper in awe, "It's Miss Smith. Land a sale with her and you'll hit your quota for the month." I watched from a distance, a small smile on my lips. She had changed so much over the years. The awkwardness of high school was gone, replaced by the polish of an adult. Her features were more defined, her aura more striking. My coworker thought I was daydreaming and nudged me with his elbow. "She's gorgeous, right? Don't even think about it. She's one of the biggest heiresses in LA. I snapped back to reality, but my smile didn't fade. Suddenly, Vivian took a call. She started yelling in a mix of Cantonese and English, then stormed out of the store. Based on the one or two sentences they overheard, my co-workers immediately started spreading gossip. The Smith family power struggle is heating up. The media's saying the old matriarch is on her way out. The second branch of the family is most likely to take over. Vivian was the daughter of the family's first branch. But her mother had been in a car accident years ago and was in a coma. I secretly prayed she would win the bloody family war. I never expected that a few months later, on a trip back to my hometown, I would be the one to find her defeated. In the months I cared for her, her leg injury gradually healed. Eventually, she listened to my advice and stopped giving up on herself. She agreed to go to the hospital to treat her eye condition. I used all my savings and even went into debt to pay for the surgery. We stayed in Los Angeles. Sometimes I would stand with her on a hill, looking out toward the glittering lights of Beverly Hills. She never explained why, until the anniversary of her mother's death, when she suddenly clung to me. She buried her head in my shoulder, her body trembling as she choked out the painful words. They killed my mom and then they kicked me out of the city. They said I could never set foot there again in this life. I felt a cold wetness on my shoulder. It was the tears she'd been holding back for so long. She told me about all the dirty secrets in her family. I cried with her, but I also made sure to encourage her. Where there's life, there's hope. After that, we stayed in Los Angeles for 3 years. We were crammed into my tiny rental apartment. During the day, I went to work at the luxury store. Vivian was busy with her own affairs. Occasionally, I'd interact with wealthy clients from Beverly Hills. I'd listen to them talk about the shifting tides within the Smith family. Then, a little while ago, I heard that the head of the Smith family was embroiled in a homicide case. And the family's first lady, previously declared to be in a vegetative state, had woken up. The leadership of the Smith family was about to change. I knew Vivian was very likely about to reclaim her position as the city's top heiress. I had already been rehearsing my farewell speech. But for days, every time I practiced it in my head, I couldn't stop myself from choking up. Today, I heard that people from her world had already arrived. I used the last of the savings I had scraped together over the past 6 months. I bought a silk pocket square from the store. I thought it would be a tasteful parting gift. Our worlds were too far apart. This was where it had to end. But I never expected her to think of me that way. A wave of hurt and bitterness washed over me. It took a long time to compose myself before I went to a boba shop to buy tea. An hour later, I returned to the apartment with the drink. Vivian had showered and was wearing the cheap pajamas I'd bought her. She offered no explanation for the woman in the business suit from earlier. She just stared at me with her deep eyes, as if waiting for me to ask something. I don't know why, but the small, cozy apartment suddenly felt cramped and oppressive. The cheap wallpaper was peeling away, revealing a mottled patch of wall underneath, making the place look even poorer. I looked away, trying to sound casual. The boba shop has a new special. I had to wait in line for over half an hour. As I spoke, I unwrapped a straw, stuck it in the cup, and took a big sip before offering it to her. You should try it. She didn't take it. A heavy silence spread between us. I awkwardly pulled my hand back. Right. She was about to go back to being a high society heiress. Why would she want to drink this cheap stuff anymore, let alone share a cup with someone? But I still remembered when we first got together. She used to complain about me eating junk food, then lean over and take a sip from my boba. A sharp pang hit my chest. I pretended to be sweating and put the drink down, heading for the bathroom. When I came out of the shower, the light overhead flickered a few times. Then it burned out completely, plunging the room into darkness. In the dark, Vivian wrapped her arms around me. I reached up to push her away, but then I heard her say, "Leo, we'll be together forever." I mumbled a soft "oh." My heart sank. Together forever? As her boy toy? I didn't let Vivian see my turmoil. I felt my way in the dark toward the hairdryer. She turned on her phone's flashlight to help me dry my hair. She even said she loved the pocket square I gave her. I realized then that she had already opened my gift. The explanation I was about to give died on my lips. I just grunted, "Glad you like it." The next day, I left at my usual time for work. But at the end of the alley, several luxury cars were already parked. A graceful woman in her 50s, surrounded by bodyguards, was walking toward the alley entrance. It was Vivian's mother. I had seen her picture in magazines. Back at the store, I handed in my resignation. I even deliberately told them Vivian was my girlfriend. When my manager heard, he approved my resignation on the spot. He even said he'd help simplify and expedite the process. I could be completely done in 2 weeks at the latest. I smiled and thanked her, then asked her to keep my departure quiet. After sorting all that out, I didn't rush back. I wandered around outside until evening before returning to the apartment. Vivian wasn't there. The small rental felt vast and empty. 3 years of memories we'd made here flashed through my mind, frame by frame. As I thought about it, my eyes welled up again. Suddenly, I heard the sound of the door opening. I quickly blinked back the tears. Vivian was wearing a custom-tailored suit. A white silk blouse was neatly tucked into perfectly pressed trousers. Her suit jacket was draped over her left arm. Her refined, expensive air was completely out of place in our old, run-down apartment. Our eyes met, and she gave a small smile, dangling the boba tea in her right hand. "I bought you boba." Her long, slender fingers lightly hooked the edge of the plastic bag. I got up to take it and caught the faint scent of alcohol on her. I figured she must have been at some banquet dressed like that. But, as usual, she didn't offer a single word of explanation. And I was the only one drinking the boba. After I'd distractedly finished half of it, Vivian suddenly grabbed my hand and pulled me out the door. Outside, a driver was waiting in a luxury car. As soon as he saw Vivian, he got out and opened the back door for us. The multi-million-dollar car sped down the road. It took us straight to the same hillside overlook I had taken her to before. Below us were the glittering neon lights of the city. Across the way was Beverly Hills, the place she had yearned for. Vivian linked her arm through mine and spoke softly. "Leo, I have to go back for a bit tomorrow." The separation I had long anticipated was finally here. I calmly replied, "Yeah, I saw the news. Congratulations." The news also said that when she went back, she would be getting engaged to a wealthy scion. "Once I get things sorted out, I'll come back and get you." Her voice was filled with a triumphant excitement, her tone lifting. I looked down at her. Seeing her look of absolute certainty, I swallowed the words as "what?" and asked instead, "Take me there for what?" "To live." Her hand suddenly gripped mine tightly, but the warmth of her touch couldn't reach my heart. The words "boy toy" flashed in my mind again, sending ripples through me. I didn't press her further, just giving a small hum of acknowledgement. Not sensing anything amiss, she made a confident and certain promise. "Leo, no matter what, no one can ever shake your place with me." I smiled. I buried the lump in my throat and the sting in my eyes in the darkness. A mountain breeze blew past. It was a summer night, but I felt like I was standing in the dead of winter. The day I finished my resignation process, Vivian still hadn't returned from Beverly Hills. The media had reported a few things about her trip. For instance, the high-profile engagement that everyone was watching. Vivian had also explained it to me via text. "Nothing can shake your place in my heart. Leo, wait for me. I'll be back to get you on Tuesday." I tactfully didn't ask any more questions. I just sent back a smiley face emo Johnston to make her think I understood. Today was Tuesday. I took one last look around the apartment. I grabbed the handle of my packed suitcase and walked away. The sky was gray and overcast, threatening rain. The sound of my suitcase wheels mixed with the noise from the street, echoing in my ears. I walked to the end of the alley and paused. Through a gap in the crowd, I saw a black luxury car parked on the side of the road. A bodyguard opened the back door. Vivian, dressed in a sharp business suit, stepped out. She adjusted her collar and started walking toward the alley. I turned off my phone and swapped in the new SIM card I'd bought a couple of days ago. I pushed through the crowd, walking in the opposite direction. Vivian returned to the empty apartment but saw no sign of Leo. I told him I'd be here to pick him up today. Where is he? She picked up her phone to call him, but it went straight to voicemail. A bad feeling crept into her heart. She looked over at the corner where he kept his suitcase. Sure enough, the familiar bag was gone. She checked the closet, and the empty hangers confirmed Leo's departure. A look of panic spread across Vivian's face. Her hand trembled as she tried calling him again. Still voicemail. Without a second thought, she bolted out of the apartment, jumped in her car, and told the driver to head straight for the luxury department store. Just as they pulled up outside, a torrential downpour suddenly fell from the sky. Vivian didn't have time to grab an umbrella and ran through the rain into the store. The manager greeted her enthusiastically. "Ms. Smith, where's Leo?" Vivian, her hair soaked and plastered to her forehead, scanned the floor. Ignoring her own disheveled state, her eyes desperately searched for a familiar figure. But he wasn't there. Her panic intensified. She turned on the stunned manager and demanded again, "I'm asking you a question. Where is Leo?" The manager finally snapped out of it. "Oh, Leo quit." "Quit? When? Why didn't she know? And why would he quit?" Before Vivian could voice her questions, the manager's answer left her frozen in place. "About 2 weeks ago. Isn't that the day after my family's people came to find me?" The manager saw Vivian's expression turn icy and felt a chill. Fearing she'd be caught in the crossfire, she quickly added an explanation. "Leo said he was going to Beverly Hills with you, so we streamlined his departure process for him." In that moment, Vivian felt as if all her strength had been drained away. Her shoulders slumped. Her spine seemed to curve. Staring at the water dripping onto the floor at her feet, the corners of her eyes turned red. Her hands clenched into tight fists. Her knuckles turned white. The manager grew even more uneasy and weakly reminded her, "Miss Smith, was there some kind of misunderstanding? Leo left about 2 hours ago. Maybe you can still find him if you look now?" Vivian lifted her reddened eyes, said nothing, and walked out of the store. "I left Los Angeles and moved to Chicago. At first, I could still see videos of Vivian online. Everyone was still trying to dig up the story of her arduous path back to the top. Everyone wanted to know how she had spent her 3 lost years. The rumors of her high-profile engagement were also still swirling, fueled by speculation. The last video I saw of her was from a formal interview where she told the host, "He is the irreplaceable, most important person in my life." After a pause, she looked deep into the camera and reiterated, "He always will be." But she still didn't say my name. After that day, all videos and news about Vivian vanished overnight. The next time I heard anything about Vivian was 2 years later. She had become the acting head of the Smith family. The media said her mother's health had taken a turn. Although she was only the acting head, the core decision-making power was already in Vivian's hands. I calmly watched the video on my phone. The Vivian on screen was even more regal and colder than before. She had the absolute authority of someone at the top. My coworker nudged me slightly. "You're a fan of the LA heiress, too?" Actually, at this point, she might be the next queen of LA. I put my phone away and just gave a faint smile. My coworker was still lamenting his own fate. "Sai, even though we sales associates get to deal with these rich people all the time, we can never be one of them." I nodded in agreement. "I guess so." Suddenly, the manager came in and told me to go entertain a VIP client. Said he was a young master from a powerful LA family. He refuses to speak English, insists on Cantonese. Money is no object. Handle him well, and you won't have to worry about your numbers this month. Full of motivation, I walked out of the stockroom and went up to the second-floor VIP lounge. The client was already sitting on the sofa, quietly reading a magazine. With my years of experience in luxury retail, I could tell at a glance that everything he was wearing was absurdly expensive. His outfit alone was worth more than an ordinary person could make in a lifetime. The invisible class divide had, in fact, always been clearly marked with a price tag. I smiled and approached, greeting him in Cantonese. "Mr. Dalton, hello." He didn't bother to acknowledge me right away. His hand, adorned with a luxury watch, casually flipped through the magazine. After a moment, He slowly lifted his head to look at me, his tone carrying the arrogance of the upper class. Your Cantonese has a bit of an LA accent. Are you from there? No, I just learned that dialect. After I got into high school, I often watched movies from there and taught myself Cantonese. During those years with Vivian, I taught her English, and she corrected my Cantonese accent. Over time, her English became more and more standard, and my Cantonese could fool people into thinking I was a native speaker. My coworker brought over all the new arrivals of clothing and shoes. Mr. Dalton casually pointed to a jacket and ordered me, "Go try this on." Trying on clothes for clients was part of the service at a luxury store. I did as I was told. This Mr. Dalton was also very generous. Almost every item that fit me, he nodded and said he'd take. In the blink of an eye, he had racked up a bill of nearly $1 million. He didn't even bat an eye. My service became even more attentive. He seemed very pleased with my demeanor. After picking out some bags, he wanted to try on shoes. I brought the pair he'd selected over to him. He said nothing, just picked up his teacup with his left hand and stuck his foot out. I bent down to change his shoes, but he flinched his foot back. He shot me a look. Is this how you people serve customers? Squatting? I prefer kneeling. I glanced at the commission number hanging in the balance and knelt on one knee without hesitation. I took off his shoe. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the staircase. From above me, Mr. Dalton's excited voice called out, "Vivian, you're here." That familiar name hit me like a bucket of ice water. I froze, almost forgetting how to react. Mr. Dalton, one shoe off, waved to her. "I'm trying on shoes." The footsteps behind me grew closer. My grip on the new shoe tightened slightly. I took a deep breath, feigned composure, and slipped the shoe onto Mr. Dalton's foot. Perfect. Put the other one on for me. Mr. Dalton stretched his leg out, satisfied, waiting for my continued service. I complied. But then I saw a pair of black women's high heels stop right in front of me. A sharp gaze swept down from above. I didn't dare look up. I just reached for the other new shoe and slid it onto Mr. Dalton's foot. He stood up happily and checked himself in the mirror. He didn't forget to ask Vivian, who was standing to the side, for her opinion. "Vivian, do these shoes look good?" Vivian gave a barely audible hum. I kept my eyes down and slowly stood up. I started spouting flattering compliments at Mr. Dalton's reflection in the mirror. I didn't dare shift my gaze even a fraction to the side. He was delighted by my flattery and cheerfully said he'd take them. Then he pointed to the other shoes nearby. "Let me try those pairs on, too." Vivian was blocking my path, so I had to go around her. As I passed, her shoulder brushed against mine. The sudden contact was like a pebble dropped into a pond, gone in an instant. Next, Mr. Dalton picked out several more pairs of shoes. Finally, he said generously, "Ring me up." I was about to take his card, but I heard Vivian's flat voice stop me. "Just this pair of shoes is fine. He doesn't need the rest." A hush fell over the VIP lounge. I felt as if my body had been encased in cement, unable to move. What did she mean? My coworker, who was assisting me, awkwardly snapped out of it. He immediately tried to save the massive sale. But Mr. Dalton looks so good in them. If Vivian says no, then no it is. The arrogant Mr. Dalton instantly transformed into a meek and considerate man. He hung on Vivian's every word. Seeing $1 million commission about to go up in smoke, I finally couldn't stop myself from looking up at Vivian. She was wearing a dark women's suit. Her features were deep set, her jawline sharp. She exuded an air of cold authority. Her eyes, fixed on me, were as sharp as a hawk's, as if trying to see right through me. Our silent eye contact created an invisible pressure. I hadn't seen her in over 2 years, and her presence was even more powerful than it appeared in videos. Thinking of the commission I was about to lose, I couldn't help but ask, "Is Ms. Smith dissatisfied with something?" She scoffed. "I'm dissatisfied with you." As she spoke, a chilling, almost imperceptible smirk played on her lips. Then, without even taking the shoes, she turned and walked out. I stood there, mortified. I looked at the room full of tried-on clothes, shoes, and bags. My eyes couldn't help but turn red. My coworker, furious, whispered angrily in my ear. That woman is insane. It's not like she was paying. What's her problem? All style, no substance. The manager came upstairs and immediately started chewing me out. Leo, what did I tell you just now? That Mr. Dalton is a big shot from LA. You just let him walk out empty-handed? Manager, it wasn't Leo's fault. It was that woman being cheap and petty. What do you mean, that woman? That's the LA heiress. You think she's short on cash for a new wardrobe? I was so berated I couldn't argue. My coworker tried to defend me, but I reached out and stopped him. It was my fault. I didn't serve the client well. How much better could you serve them? You have to get on both knees to be sincere? These rich people think they own the world. But the manager wasn't listening. He just told me to write a 2,000-word self-criticism report, or I could quit. Then he left me to clean up the entire room by myself. Vivian. She did it on purpose. She was getting revenge for me leaving without a word. When I got off work that evening and walked out of the department store, I saw a black luxury car parked at the side of the building. I ignored it and walked along the sidewalk toward the subway station. Just as I reached the entrance, the car finally pulled up. Vivian rushed out and caught up to me. She grabbed my arm fiercely and wouldn't let go. Leo, you stop right there. She was probably furious, because she was gripping my arm with all her strength. For a second, I had the illusion that she was trying to snap my arm in two. The subway entrance was crowded with people. I didn't want to block the way, so I shifted to the side. Then I lifted my eyes and looked at her calmly. Miss Smith, can I help you? Her eyes widened in disbelief. What did you call me? The words were so tense they seemed to be squeezed from between her teeth. I acted as if I hadn't noticed and answered her calmly. Miss Smith. The grip on my wrist loosened for half a second. Then it clamped down even tighter. She pulled me into her arms, angry and domineering, hugging me tightly. Leo, why are you doing this? Do you have any idea I've been going crazy looking for you? Do you know how much I've missed you? She held me so tightly it felt like she was trying to merge me into her body. Miss Smith, please let go. Don't call me Miss Smith. If you act like this, Miss Smith, aren't you afraid your fiancé will get angry? She froze for a moment. I sighed softly. Miss Smith, please have some self-respect. The repeated use of Miss Smith finally pushed her to the edge. Her lips trembled as she spoke. Leo, The dim yellow light from the street lamp under the tree made it seem, for a moment, like I saw guilt in her eyes. But in less than a second, I let out a resigned laugh. We were always from different worlds. A dignified goodbye is the best ending for both of us. Boom! A clap of thunder cracked across the sky. Another summer had arrived. Fat raindrops began to fall, splattering on the pavement and kicking up dust. Watching people hurry into the subway entrance, I planned to do the same before the downpour started. Goodbye, Miss Smith. The farewell I hadn't said 2 years ago was finally spoken today. Vivian didn't try to stop me. Until I had entered the subway station, she remained rooted to the spot, as still as a statue. All around her, people rushed past to get out of the rain. I paused and glanced back at her. She was looking at me, her lips moving slightly. The distance was too great, I couldn't hear what she was saying. I couldn't understand what she was trying to say either. In an instant, the torrential rain soaked her completely. But she didn't move an inch, standing tall and motionless. She looked just like she had when I first found her. Back then, she had fallen from a vibrant LA heiress to a broken, penniless woman. At the darkest moment of her life, she felt no human warmth. Blind and with an injured leg. Even after her leg healed, she remained self-destructive. One day, during a heavy storm, she stood on the ridge of a field in the village. Below her was a swollen river. I panicked and threw my arms around her. Vivian, are you crazy? That's a river down there. If you fall in during this season, you'll die. The rain was so heavy I could barely open my eyes, but I didn't dare loosen my grip on her. She just laughed, completely unconcerned. Then let me die. No one will care anyway. Who said no one cares? Ikare. Thunder rumbled across the sky, and a brilliant flash of lightning struck a nearby hillside with a deafening crash. She turned her unseeing eyes, searching for me. Like a lost, homeless child, she asked weakly, "Will you have me?" I nodded emphatically with absolute certainty. "Yes, I'll have you." Once I was on the train, I finally realized what Vivian had just been saying. "You don't want me anymore?" A sudden, sharp pain shot through my heart. I forced myself to hold it together, walked onto the train, and grabbed a handrail. Only after the train started moving did the tears begin to silently fall. Vivian, who was it that didn't want who? Even if I came from a poor village, I wasn't some backup plan you could summon at will. I wasn't some boy toy who could never be seen in public. The next day, I went to work as usual. As soon as I reached the entrance, my coworker pulled me back outside. "That guy from yesterday is back. He's asking for you by name. Mr. Dalton?" "Yeah." "He doesn't look happy. And he was just asking us a lot of questions about you." My coworker looked at me with concern. "Leo, you didn't piss off these rich people, did you?" I shook my head. When I got inside, my manager gave me a heavy-handed pep talk. I couldn't let the VIP client leave empty-handed again. I went up to the second-floor VIP lounge and heard a man, Kyle Dalton, on the phone speaking French. "He's just a sales clerk. Not worth making a big deal about. I'll make him understand that poor people need to accept their fate." When he saw me come in, he didn't bother to end his call. He just pointed at a pair of shoes and told me to kneel and serve him. I knelt on one knee, just as I had yesterday. But this time, he used the tip of his shoe to lift my chin. His voice dripped with condescending disdain. "I like it when you're on both knees." Then he continued his phone conversation. "These poor people are so pathetic. For a few bucks, there's nothing they won't sell." My lips pressed into a thin line, but I chose to stand up. Kyle Dalton, still chattering away, noticed I wasn't following his orders. He shot me a cold glare. "Who told you to stand up so high?" "Mr. Dalton, I am a sales associate, not your servant." "Is that so? I'll buy all of this. Will you serve me now?" He gestured casually at merchandise worth 7 figures, plus a 6-figure bag. I didn't move. He kept adding more. The amount was staggering. When the total climbed to nearly $10 million, I finally relented. Only this time I was smarter. I told him directly that he would have to pay first. Kneeling service? Fine. Who was I to argue with money? He was right. We're all just hustling for a few bucks. When he heard the words "pay first," his face darkened. "What do you mean? You're just a little sales clerk, and you want to tell a customer when to pay?" I looked at him with a faint smile, neither servile nor defiant. "Of course not. It's just that the kind of extra service Mr. Dalton is requesting is only available after the bill has been paid." He was so angry he picked up a cup of hot tea from the table, about to throw it at me. For some reason, he stopped, put the tea down. He grabbed a bottle of mineral water instead, walked over, and poured it over my head. My coworker, coming up the stairs, was shocked. "Mr. Dalton, what do you think you're doing?" After he had emptied the entire bottle, the man in front of me contemptuously tossed it aside. He looked at me with disgust. "You're just a poor bastard from some dirt-poor village. If you know what's good for you, you'll crawl away on your own. Otherwise, things will only get more embarrassing for you." My coworker grabbed some tissues to help me wipe the water from my face. He confronted Mr. Dalton. That was incredibly insulting. Insulting? Mr. Dalton sat back down. "I'm just teaching him a lesson. A little wake-up call." He took out his phone and snapped a few pictures of my pathetic state. Then he continued his conversation in French. "Ethan, look. Doesn't he look like a miserable stray dog on the street? It's fine, he can't understand what I'm saying anyway. Besides, even if he had 100 times the nerve, he wouldn't dare go tattling to Vivian." I bent down, picked up a tissue, and slowly wiped the water from myself. Then I took out my phone, found Vivian's number, and called her. I spoke calmly. "Vivian, tell your people to stay away from me." The VIP lounge fell silent. Mr. Dalton was completely stunned. His hand holding his phone tightened. I even continued, right in front of him, speaking to Vivian in French. I don't know what this Mr. Dalton has misunderstood, but he decided to come here and ruin my day. If he gets his kicks from insulting me, I'd appreciate it if you'd rein him in. After I finished, I hung up the phone. And Mr. Dalton finally realized I could understand French. His face went from pale to flushed and back again. French and English were Vivian's second languages. She had taught me in the past. And for the last 2 years, I had continued practicing my speaking skills with online tutors. So while I couldn't read or write it well, I could understand and speak it conversationally. You? He stammered for a moment, unable to get another word out. Suddenly, as if remembering something, he got up to leave. He took a few steps, then turned back to grab the bag he had forgotten. Looking at the room full of merchandise, my coworker complained once again. Is that Mr. Dalton crazy or something? Is he just messing with us? Orders a ton of stuff, doesn't buy a single thing. I took a deep breath and forced a slight smile. He wasn't here to buy anything. He was here to cause trouble for me. The Dalton family. If I remembered correctly, Vivian's fiancé was a Dalton, right? Just not this Mr. Dalton. My coworker told me to go to the restroom and clean myself up. I looked at my water-soaked uniform and nodded. I hadn't realized how pathetic I looked until I saw my reflection. In the restroom, I saw that I really did look like a stray dog. My wet hair was a mess, plastered to my head. The white shirt underneath was soaked through, clinging to my skin. It was a complete disaster. When I got back to my station after cleaning up, Vivian was already waiting there. Leo! She strode toward me. Her eyes held a glimmer of joy that I couldn't quite decipher. I figured she must have misunderstood something. Did she think my calling her for help was some kind of indirect attempt at reconciliation? At that thought, my face hardened. Miss Smith, your friend Mr. Dalton has interfered with my work. I hope it doesn't happen again. I was just an ordinary person. I needed to work, I needed my commission, I needed to eat. I didn't have time to be a plaything for rich people like them. Seeing my cold and distant attitude, the expression on Vivian's face wilted like a frostbitten flower, fell instantly. She didn't say much more, just gave a single promise. It won't happen again. Before she left, she spent a fortune, buying a huge pile of things. She put it all under my sales ID. And for the shipping address, she wrote down my address. I kept my eyes lowered and spoke in a professional tone. Miss Smith, employees are not allowed to receive packages for customers. She didn't argue, just changed it to a local address. And she specifically requested that I deliver it personally. 7 p.m. That was the time she set. When the time came, I deliberately asked my coworker to come with me to make the delivery. When Vivian opened the door, her face fell. Miss Smith, here are the items you purchased from our store today. The items have been delivered, so we won't disturb you any further. I set the things down and turned to leave. But then I saw a photo of her and me displayed in the living room. In it, I was smiling brightly, my arm draped over her shoulder. She had a slight upturn of her lips, but her eyes were full of laughter. It was like a message, telling me that we had once been in love. My coworker saw it too and gave me a surprised look. I pretended I hadn't seen anything and started to walk away, but Vivian grabbed my hand. Leo, don't go. The lighting was perfect, casting a halo around her. The scene was so dramatic, like a movie coming to life, but I knew I didn't want to be that boy toy. I looked down at the fingertips trying so desperately to hold me back. The long, slender bones were visibly taut with the effort. I used to love holding her hand, interlocking our fingers. I would always tell her how beautiful her hands were, praising them with a grin. Miss Smith, please have some self-respect. I slowly, firmly, and deliberately pulled my hand away. In the past, I was the one who reached for her hand. Now I was the one pulling away. She looked like she was about to shatter, but she still uncurled her fingers, one by one. After that, Vivian didn't bother me again. She was from LA after all and was just in Chicago on business. I thought her appearance in my life would be as fleeting as a shooting star. After all, from the moment she told someone I was just a boy toy, and with her engagement to the socially equal Mr. Dalton, it was clear she was a very rational person. She had too much to lose, so she could never give it all up. In her balancing act of compromises, I was the one to be sacrificed. But my pride wouldn't let me accept that. So, a clean break was the most logical outcome. I don't know when it started, But suddenly a lot of customers were requesting me by name. And every one of them was a big spender. They came from all over. It all seemed like normal business. But I had a nagging suspicion that Vivian was behind it. Until one day, a famous young heir from LA came into the store. The moment I saw him, I knew. It was Vivian's fiancé. He looked a bit like the troublemaker, Kyle Dalton. They were probably cousins or something. This Mr. Dalton, Ethan, was handsome and refined, with the air of an elite professional. There was very little about him online. What little there was praised his sharp business acumen. They even said he had huge ambitions, not content with just being the CEO of his family's company. He was positioned to be the future head of the family. He paid for several $100,000 worth of items up front. Then he looked at me. "Mr. Johnston, please come with me to the second floor." I thought he was going to humiliate me, but I never expected him to apologize. He said his younger cousin was immature and had caused me trouble. As we talked, his emotional intelligence was so high you couldn't find a single fault. But I could still feel his condescending gaze from above. He wasn't really here to apologize. When the conversation turned to my background, he elegantly critiqued me. "Do you know why Vivian chose to support your village back then? Because she used to be in poor health, and a fortune teller told her mother that she needed to do some good deeds to balance her karma." After he finished, he stood up with a smile. "It was just a casual act of charity. There's no need to get too full of yourself." I stood there, staring at him. "Mr. Johnston, it wasn't easy for Vivian to get where she is today. I don't mind your existence, but I hope you'll think carefully about your position." I understood what he was there for. He was telling me to be smart and disappear. His so-called not minding was the contempt of a superior for an inferior. I suddenly understood what Vivian had meant back then when she talked about the filth of the upper class. It was indeed disgusting. I quit my job again, and I left Chicago. With the savings I had scraped together over the past 2 years, I went to San Diego. It was as if everything had returned to the starting point before I ever met Vivian. I cut myself off from all social media. I let time slowly drift by. When winter came, I took some food and stood by the bay, feeding the seagulls. Life was peaceful and quiet, but then I suddenly heard a surprised exclamation beside me. "That woman is so beautiful. She's been kneeling for 3 days. Are they filming a TikTok? I heard she's that famous LA heiress. She's praying to the heavens to let her see the man she loves one more time. Oh my God. Did the person she loves die? No, they said they broke up because of a misunderstanding." I glanced at the girl's phone. The video was of Vivian. She was kneeling devoutly before an altar, praying for something. I finally opened up my browser. I searched for Vivian Smith, and I discovered that in the short 6 months I had been offline, a lot had happened. She had called off her engagement to the Dalton family. At a banquet, in front of all the guests, she had poured champagne all over Kyle Dalton. It was a total humiliation. The comments said it was because he had done something similar to the person she cared about. They also said that after Ethan Dalton's engagement was broken, he was kicked out of the family's core leadership. The Smith family also went through a major shakeup. The second and third branches of the family were forced out of the business and left LA. Vivian became the youngest person to ever take control. In just 6 months, it was as if Vivian had raced through a checklist, getting everything done. All the ruthless decisions, the immense obstacles, the bloody battles, all condensed into these few concluding sentences. Now, she was the victor standing at the summit. She should have been looking down on everyone. But instead, she was on her knees, devoutly praying to see me again. The nameless, important person she had mentioned to the media was finally revealed. His name is Leo Johnston. He is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. I want to tell him I never considered him an option. Everything I did was to clear the obstacles for our future. I watched the videos one by one, frame by frame. Only then did I realize she had just been enduring it all, plotting everything. A tidal wave of longing washed over me. I rushed back to my rental, grabbed my bag, and headed for the airport. The chapel she was at was in Los Angeles, a place I knew well. By nightfall, I finally saw that familiar figure. She was still kneeling there. Her back was straight. A bodyguard beside her was trying to persuade her. "Miss Smith, it's been 3 days. Mr. Johnston still hasn't shown up. He probably hasn't seen the videos. Let's try another way." I saw them. Time seemed to stand still. The cold wind blowing in felt like it carried the warmth of summer, searing my heart. Vivian, kneeling before the altar, slowly turned around. Her eyes flickered. I stepped over the threshold and walked toward her, a mess of tears and laughter. "Vivian, I saw them." She scrambled to her feet and ran toward me. She threw her arms around me and spoke urgently. "Leo, you overheard what I said to my mother's people, didn't you? I never really wanted you to be my boy toy. I said that for my mother's spies to hear. I know my mother too well. She would never allow me to care so much for a man." I hugged her back and answered softly, "I know." On the way here, I had thought it all through. I was already half sure that what she had done was a strategic retreat. I also told myself that when I saw her this time, I had to get a clear answer. If she gave me any other excuse, this would be the last time I ever saw her. Thankfully, she explained it herself. I bit my lip and laid my cards on the table first. "Vivian, I will absolutely not be a boy toy." She let go, placing her hands on my shoulders, her eyes fiery and serious. "Not a boy toy. My husband. Will you be my husband?" I looked up at her, then glanced at the altar before us, and answered with a firm, heavy nod. "Yes."